I suppose the message we've got back from our grant holders who are looking to secure contracts is that too often the added value that they bring as a social enterprise isn't written into the contract, isn't scored, and therefore they're not in a position to demonstrate that added value in the final evaluation, and it comes down to value for money. Which they may not be able to compete equally, and other areas where they might have been able to make up some ground haven't been included in the specification. I mean, that's not universal, but that seems to be a problem, and there are still examples. Yes, and I'm sure there's an element of the rhetoric is great. Well, it's more than rhetoric; it's intent and it's policy at the top. But the people who are actually writing the spec are working in the bowels of council offices and departments, and how often do they take the last contract spec, dust it off, change the dates, and then when do they start with a blank sheet of paper, and who's actually monitoring that the specifications are reflecting those decisions being taken in cabinets across the land.
Good point. I have to be careful of obviously how I reply to that. But so what you're saying is, from a policy, from a high level, the thought processes are there.
There's no doubt there is very clear intent,
there's
both
clear
at
intent.
central government, Welsh government, but also at local authority level, that social enterprises bring a lot of value, and having them involved in the procurement chain brings huge value and is in the interests of this country. And there is a clear intent. It's making that intent happen, and I guess it's officers at middle manager level or lower who actually write the specifications and undertake those procurement exercises that may perfectly innocently not be reflecting that intent.
Sometimes it's not really their fault, because they're bound by European legislation, their own policies within their own councils.
There's also an element, I'm sure.
Budget obviously comes into it.
And again, I mean, I don't work in a local authority, but the big lottery fund is subject to restrictions in the Lottery Act and what we can and can't do and what we can and can't fund. We have a legal department, and they're very conservative, and we have to push, and usually we push successfully. And with much sucking of teeth, we end up and go and fund something that initially we'll be, no, that's against our vires. And I'm sure there's and to what extent are people who are writing the specification saying, right, well, I'll go and check with legal whether we can put that in. Well, we've never done that in the past, or well, we'll play it safe and leave it out.
So what you're saying is possibly risk aversion?
I would imagine so, yeah. This is conjecture. I have no evidence.
I'm just trying to interpret what you're saying. I think it's...
There's someone in a previous life who was responsible for commissioning and issuing specifications and tender. Yes. So writing a specification for a service, for a public sector service, is a hell of the first thing is, where's the last one?
Yes.
And the degree of effort and innovation that goes into reviewing that, of course, is subject to what people want to put in.
Would you say that people have the opportunity to look at lessons learned from previous tenders?
Oh yes, they do. Yeah,
they do have the time. Are there anything else that you find pressing? Obviously, from your point of view, Janet, you've had lots of experience with different businesses over the years, and
I think social enterprises, they're a business the same as any other business. So the sort of support you're giving them, I sit in two camps, because I firmly believe that it's business support they need if they're going to be a successful business.
Okay.
But I also accept that there are different issues given the mindset of some of the organisations.
Confusion of what a social enterprise is. You talk to social enterprises, and many of them will say, look, we're a business, and we stand on our own feet, and we compete head to head, because actually, certainly, even in the public sector, there will be directors of finance, directors of services who say, fine, if you want to do this stuff, go and get yourself a grant. I'm in the business of providing the best service, value for money, balancing the budget, and I love what you do, but you're not going to get the contract on that basis. There'll be others. And I've heard that recently. You play to your customer. There'll be others who want to know I mean, as we heard this morning, people buy candles. Oh yeah, I like that because there's something that goes with it, and you're not buying candles, you're letting contracts. But nevertheless, there will be some people who are prepared to give a little. But and so the extent to which the social element and the social enterprise element plays into a contract is very difficult.
Isn't it, to the business principle and the product?
There is in terms of trying to shift along from intent to how it actually plays out at working level. Whether you could...
I know I'm giving you much time there, but can I...
Whether...
Can I wrap this first part up, because I very much want to get into the second
Welsh Government could develop some model social criteria that people could slip into their contracts, that are cleared by legal, so you know they're legal. You don't have to think. You just copy, paste, copy.
Obviously, there's two sides when it comes to winning contracts. There's the buyer side, and there's the supplier side. My role within the Welsh Government is very much focused on the supplier side. In other words, better equipping and skilling social enterprises and businesses to win contracts. What I can't do very much about within my area, and our minister's limited because it's her portfolio areas around that contact with businesses. We can't do that much around the buyer behaviour. However, we've got Brendan here from Value Wales, who has more influence in that particular area. Again, we are constrained to a large degree by European regulations, but again, we will take feedback on buyer behaviour, if you like, as well. Okay, if we start with Ed's group, what's your I was going to say burning issue or burning barrier? That doesn't sound right, does it? What's the main barrier then? Just give me one. Yeah, what's the main one you can?
The main one really is if a company hasn't got 3 years accounts, then obviously it's a lot more time intensive and labour intensive to actually assist that company or that social enterprise. Sorry, they need a lot more hand holding, a lot more support. So it's just whether that's out there. And there was an issue or an alarm raised that if we're radically changing the SDS, would it be able to give that?
Okay, so it's basically saying, younger companies then essentially, more...
Ones without a track record, really.
Yeah, that came up this morning, didn't it?
I mean, that's across the board, that's not just social enterprises.
Yeah.
So there's a big gap getting ready for when the growth development.
Well, it's an interesting point though, because, again, moving forward, is us actually having that thinking about, well, should we be directing our support more at those sort of companies? Not being cynical, maybe if a company's been around 10 years and, should be thinking, well, come on, they've been around long enough. They should be able to win contracts. So I'm not saying that is the case, but again, I think it's an interesting point, and again, it opens up this area of maybe how we should prioritise the service moving forward. So, yeah. And it's got to be different as well to the previous group as well. So
I think time and resources was one of the key issues for us, because generally for a business in the traditional sense, it's difficult to go into tendering and to make progress in that area and to win contracts, because the amount of work involved going from starting from scratch to actually submitting a tender, and then you multiply that into a community organisation where they are perhaps finding their feet as an income generating organisation, to then have to go and submit and move forward with tendering. So I think time and resources was a key issue for us, a key barrier.
Okay. Yeah, there's probably it's an issue for us to think about, obviously, in terms of supplier side, again, in terms of the support we provide, in terms of how we can help companies sort of take up less of their time, less of their resources. What tips and tricks can we give them, if you like? And obviously from the Value Wales side, and obviously they're lobbied on this all the time, how can we make the procurement processes simpler as well?
Sorry, what you were saying earlier on about updating the SEWales2011 site, then there might be something that can be done about cross-referencing between... There is.
You're quite excited about this one, and Brenda can probably explain better than me. One thing we're looking to do, and it's called SQUID, which is kind of it's just a weird acronym. It's a Supplier
Qualification Information Database.
Right. What this means, and we're looking hopefully to deploy it by the end of next year. But it should make a big difference. What it means with pre-qualification questionnaires is every time a company does them at the moment, they have to submit the same basic details every time. This system means they won't have to. Yeah. That's number one. The second thing is as well, often they're answering the same questions time and time again, or slight variants of the questions. Now what this system is going to give us is going to start giving buyers a common set of questions to use, maybe with some supplementary questions. So when we deploy this system, and it's based upon quite a lot of research with suppliers as well, it should really start to make a big difference. You know, I take it that in itself is still not probably enough, but I think that could make a big difference. So I'm glad to, in a way, to hear that this is a problem that we can actually look as if we can.
So what we were saying was, you know, as a company, it's almost like putting your CV out there, and then just tailoring it if you need to for a particular tender.
Well, that's what the SQUID system will do, isn't it, Brendan? In many ways, really.
I think the key thing about this SQUID system is it's going to address one of the issues we came up with, requirements for previous experience and references. You know, if it's got to be 3 years or three similar projects that you've worked on, or 3 years accounts, then it can put you out of the game. Well, what SQUID is going to is doing is making it a proportionate approach as well. So, you know, if it's a £50,000 contract, why should you ask for 3 years accounts? If it's a business critical service you're buying, obviously there'll need to be some safeguards there. But if it's not, if it's something, well, it doesn't arrive on Monday morning, you can always get another supplier. You know, we shouldn't be taking the approach we're asking for all this stuff, all these policies and all the rest of it. So, you know, SQUID is both to help the supplier and the buyer, and to, as I say, make it a proportionate approach to the tendering exercise. So for the lower value stuff, below overdue, that you might like a few of them, then, you know, it should be quicker to do that than to, as I said this morning, kind of tender for the second Severn crossing or a Severn barrage. It shouldn't be the same tender as for a £50,000 contract.
It's not pie in the sky, it's SQUID as well. I mean, you know, we are genuinely looking to have it in place by next year, and a bit like SEWales2011, even though it's not the most modern site at the moment, we were the first in putting that in place, and hopefully we'll be the same with SQUID as well. This group, anything over and above?
Be multinational, loss leading, cutting you out of the game.
Yes. What we're coming up against quite a lot is we're tendering on a weekly basis for contracts. But unfortunately, it all falls down to pricing, and that's the feedback we're getting across the board. And it's all these big multinational companies, blue chip companies, that are getting in at ridiculous prices that small businesses like ourselves and even our closest competitors just down the valley, they can't meet it. You can't even manufacture at that cost. They're doing it as a loss leader, so right away we've lost that contract. So we're spending days on a contract knowing at the end up it's going to come down to price, and that's unfortunate.
I don't know what the answer to that one is, to be honest.
There's a way around that, and it takes us back to the SEWales2011 website, in that if you can, because you're part of the supply chain really, aren't you? You know, it's not often people just go out for signage. It's they're building a building or they're building a road, and signage will be part of that. So if you can spot who's won those big contracts, if there's your big blue chip multinationals, then it's kind of, and we've tried to do this with you, and we've tried to give you links in, but to get in touch with them and say, look, we know you've just won this big contract. Is there any chance you could work with us and, you know, see what, at least come and see what we've got to offer? And it ties into, you know, perhaps tap into the CSR drivers as well. Multinationals, they still want to look good, and they still have, you know, some good things to say about, you know, social responsibility as well.
That with Caroline, and it's just knocking on the correct door. I've been there 3 times. Maybe next time I'll be lucky. Never know.
I mean, just to mention on that again, I'm kind of jumping onto the next part really, to some extent. A couple of areas where we're starting to do some work in this area where I think we can make big gains. One is sell to Wales. I think what we got to remember with a lot of large contracts, particularly huge contracts, is companies win them, like Balfour BT, like Serco. They don't do much. All they do, cynical way of putting it, they just cream 15% or whatever off the top. No, what they do is they manage it. They subcontract everything down, basically. What we're looking to do is we're already starting to work with what we call some tier ones. For example, we met with a company called Horizon recently, who we're going to be developing Wilver in North Wales, which is massive, you know, 15 billion or something. So you can imagine the subcontracting opportunities, very diverse, you know, really long supply chain there. We're trying to get them to use Sell2Wales so Welsh suppliers will see the contract opportunities that become available. That's one thing. The second thing then is we are starting now to have some dialogue with big companies over them subcontracting to smaller companies and within Wales. And the good thing is, I sense a lot of the large companies want to do it. They just don't know how. And give you an example, we were approached by Fujitsu recently. We're competing for a contract. They're one of 3 companies up for this particular contract, but they came to us and said, oh, can we have some advice on working with local suppliers? And we were then told by the people doing the procurement, not sure if you can do that. And I'm thinking, oh, this is crazy, you know. We've got a large multinational coming to us and actually saying we want to use Welsh suppliers, then, you know, potentially we as buyers are saying, we resolved it, you know, we are going to work with them and do a presentation to them. So I think there are a lot of potential openings there. I think sometimes it's not, you know, evil multinationals don't want to crowd out small suppliers. I think very often they're not sure how to go about it.
There's a scheme going on in Blaenau at the moment, and they will engage when they're actually constructing in that area. But the minute they leave that area, it's basically they don't want anything to do with you.
Yeah, I mean that is more tricky. But I think in areas like that, we talk about it with Wilver at the moment. You know, once Wilver is up, you know, 6,000 people there when it's being built. You know, when the thing's up, there will only be a few hundred. Now, to be fair, the companies are building up. They can't do very much about it. I think that the key then is when we build the capacity of those local companies then have got to be willing to go to other parts of the UK and take a Welsh workforce with them and do work there, and you know, which is tough. But you know. Anyway, I'm kind of moving on. What I'd like you to do, and we haven't got very much time at all, so I'm really going to give you 5 minutes on this. Is that, you know, some really good feedback then. We got onto solutions in a large part anyway, but if you can each then come up, I'll give you 5 minutes. What's the key thing? What's the key change? And let's put the onus on the Welsh Government, because you know that's what this presentation is about. What is the key thing that the Welsh Government isn't doing that we could be doing to help social enterprises win contracts? I got to emphasise, of course, it doesn't mean that we are going to be able to do it, but you know, today is about getting ideas back from you, getting feedback from you, and at least considering it. So each group, one idea in terms of what we could be doing better or could be doing differently to help social enterprises win contracts. So there we are, 5 minutes.